let me see. I think back in June of June 19th of this year, we was our last webinar, and that was the either the um, navigating white institutions as Native students webinar, and we partnered with U of A's Agnes Adikai with that one and her team to do to do a webinar for Native students. And these webinars are for Native students here in Arizona and their families, their parents, and their school personnel to learn about opportunities that that they may not already know. And for these webinars, the focus is on college planning. So for our college planning series, what we wanted was to invite these presenters that have these resources and these opportunities that students might not already know about, so that we can promote it on this web platform. So when we do these, not only do we conduct these webinars, but we also record these webinars. We want to do this so that we can have those that are unable to attend the webinars to view our webinars at a later time. And we do have our AIEA YouTube channel, and we post the webinars on there. And what we wanted was to hold a sort of a forum, a panel, so that we can have the students learn about these opportunities, but also if they have any questions or want to inquire, or if they want to get more connected with these coordinators for these programs, that they'd have the opportunity to do that even beyond the webinar, go outside, and then after the webinar, they can continue to do that connection with the coordinators. So, again, we do record these webinars for that purpose, and, they will be posted on the AIEA YouTube channel. And then we do ask for questions and answers to be held until the question and answer portion. That's going to be after the presenter and the presentation. So it will be indicated inside the slides. So moving on. So what is AIEA? AIEA is a 501c3 nonprofit that serves Arizona educators, teachers, non-educators, and educators not inside the classroom, and then American Indian students, parents, families, caregivers, that want to learn about opportunities here inside Arizona for their Native students on a federal, state, and local level. So what we do is we connect with different American Indian services and programs from these three levels to get to the Native American family, to their Native students. We serve pre-K all the way to 12 and beyond. So we have our opportunities like our youth camps serving middle school students all the way to our American Indian student scholarship every year that goes from middle school to college and university students as well. And to reach us, we do have a webpage. This webpage is on the Intertribal Council of Arizona's website. So if you type in www.itcaonline.com/AIEA, that will take you to our webpage, and that will include our introduction of what AIEA is, what our services are, what our background, and also our general meeting information that we meet monthly, via Zoom. And then also we do have our general meetings schedule up on that webpage as well. And then also our sub web pages that include our events. Our student scholarship program already wrapped up, so that might still be on there. But also we do have our upcoming winter youth camp. The webpage should be up there by now. I will check later on to see if that is up there, but that is one of our programs coming up in December, towards the end of the month. And then also we have our upcoming educators award ceremony, or our educators celebration event, along with our educators nomination packet, which is all up on the same subweb page. And those are for teachers to submit their award nomination forms for this statewide award. And then also we do have our YouTube channel that includes our recorded general monthly meetings. And then also we do have our AIEA webinar series up there. So, that's stemming all the way from April of this year. So if you guys would like to check out our AIEA YouTube channel to look at our past webinars or our general meetings, you can definitely look that up. So it's at the Arizona Indian Education Association. If you type that inside the search bar in YouTube, then that should come up. And then also we do have a Facebook page as well. It's very active. We update that almost daily, I would say. And, we circulate different relevant articles regarding Indian education, but then also we do update our AIEA events. So like I said, we have our YouTube webinar information that's up on the Facebook page, and then we also have our general meeting information along with our youth camp information. And then lastly, we have our educators banquet celebration information up on there. So like I said, the purpose of the AIEA education webinars are to circulate information about college preparedness or college planning resources. So we usually invite presenters that we think are good to share information that would be relevant to students in middle school, high school, and even in college already to share their opportunities and their programs and their services. So now I'm going to move on to what the meat of our webinar is. So we're going to have our featured FAFSA information. This is just a general outline of what the FAFSA information presentation is. So we're going to introduce what is the FAFSA, what is needed to complete the FAFSA, and then do our FAFSA application walkthrough, and then also what to do after. And then lastly, our question and answers portion for attendees to submit their questions either through the chat box or ask the presenter herself, your questions. So we will get started, and I'm going to hand it off to Delphina Thomas, the Financial Aid Outreach Specialist at South Mountain Community College. She is our presenter for this webinar. And Delphina, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Jerry. And thank you so much for inviting me to this. I really appreciate the invitation. And I think this is something that's really important for all students to learn and understand. So whenever I talk to anybody about financial aid or about the FAFSA, I like to tell them a little bit about my story as far as where I came from and what my FAFSA journey was like, because, oftentimes students will see me and think like, oh, she knows a lot about FAFSA, or FAFSA comes easy to her, or financial aid. And that wasn't ever really the case when I did my undergrad. So yeah, we'll get started. You do the next slide, please. Perfect. Okay, so my mom and dad, very important to me. My mom has actually a third grade education. She was pulled out of school when she was in third grade, and by my great grandmother, who told her that weaving and all of these other things that are really important to our culture, our Navajo culture, she pulled her out of school and told her, you need to learn how to weave and take care of the sheep and do all of these things because those are really important things. And so from then on, my mom told me how important education is, and always encouraged me to pursue education. On the other hand, my dad actually went to Indian boarding school. He went to Chilocco Indian School in Oklahoma, and so he did his high school. He did high school there, but one of the things that he did a lot of was carpentry. So they didn't teach, a lot of like math or history or like the classes that we see today. They taught him basically a trade, which was carpentry. And so he was a carpenter all of his life. And both of them are from Indian Wells, Arizona. And Indian Wells is about, it's about 3.5 hours north from here, from Phoenix. And it's on the reservation, the Navajo reservation. But when I was 5 years old, my parents actually separated, and my mom moved me and my 3 older siblings into Holbrook, Arizona, which is about 30 miles from the reservation, from Indian Wells. And so that's where I grew up. I did kindergarten through high school there. And so when I graduated from high school, I went to Providence, Rhode Island. And from Providence, I actually spent 6 months in London for a study abroad program. And then when I was done with college and with my undergrad in Providence, I actually came back here to Phoenix to do my master's degree in the American Indian Studies Department at ASU. So I have my MS in Indigenous Rights and Social Justice. And then from then on, I decided to pursue my PhD. And so right now I'm in the midst of my PhD program. It's the Justice Studies program at ASU as well. And it's fully funded, but the cities and the towns, or the cities that you see there, are places that I went to visit last year in 2019. And all of these trips were fully funded. I received funding from different sources. So like from my department, from even professors who use some of their research money to get me to these conferences. And so I've been, to Albuquerque. I went to Boston twice last year. I went to Oakland, which is near San Francisco. And then my biggest trip was in Hamilton, New Zealand, where I presented. And it was just all incredible experiences. So I certainly do not come from wealth. I don't come from a family that has, degrees under their belt. I'm a first generation college student. And even though I have 3 older siblings, I'm the only one in my family with a bachelor's and a master's degree, or even a master's degree, because they don't have bachelor's degrees, let alone, like a PhD. So yeah, and I was also low income. My mom was on disability most of her life. And so that's, how we got by, but I don't come from wealth. I don't come from any of those things. And, I guess the message that I'm trying to give here is that there are a lot of sources available using financial aid. So I'll go to the next slide. And these are just a couple of places. So here's Indian Wells on the left. And then here's my hometown of Holbrook, which is like less than 5,000 people. So you can imagine how small these places are. And then the next slide. And this is downtown Providence, Rhode Island. And the reason I went to Providence, Rhode Island, I don't know, I guess maybe I like small things, like small places or something, because Providence and Rhode Island are like one of the smallest states in the US, is because of my school, which is in the next slide. Brown University. So Brown is an Ivy League school, and basically it's in the same realm of like education or college as Yale, Harvard, Penn, all these, like Cornell. So it's basically in the same level of that. It's one of the first schools, I think, that was founded. Anyway, it's an Ivy League school. That's where I went. I couldn't afford it without any financial aid or any grants or scholarships or anything like that. In the next slide, please. And then here's London. So here's some of like the landmarks. Big Ben, not really that big if you go there. So if you ever go to London and you were like, I want to see Big Ben, it's pretty small, but it's beautiful, magnificent place. And I love architecture. So this was probably the highlight of everything. Next slide, please. And this is just a map of all the places I've been, just to give you an idea. And the next slide. Yeah, so in my financial aid journey, again, I talk about my family's experience with education because of FAFSA. No one knew how to do FAFSA. My sisters at that point, by the time I graduated from high school, didn't remember how to complete FAFSA or what to do or what they put in for my parents' information. And so they were just as lost as I was, just because there's an age difference, like an age gap between me and my sisters. And anyway, so since I've completed FAFSA, I had to navigate it myself. But since my first FAFSA, I continuously complete my FAFSA every year because I need to. And in completing my FAFSA, I've received over $100,000 in grants and scholarships, and this does not include my current funding as a PhD student. My funding as a PhD student, I get my tuition waiver, health insurance, and also a bi-weekly stipend. So I get paid to be a teaching associate. So right now I'm teaching at ASU this semester, and will be teaching again next semester. And that's how I get money, as well as this job, which I really enjoy. I like talking about FAFSA and helping students, parents, and community members complete FAFSA. But I apply for funding all the time in order to share my research at different conferences. So as you've seen, I went to a lot of places last year and just like was constantly traveling, and I really enjoyed it, but I really also enjoyed sharing my research, and it was all funded. So I didn't have to really pay for anything. Next slide. All right. So for me, whenever I start anything, and this goes today, this stands for today, so this is something that I still do, is for my to-do list, I provide and request all necessary documents to complete my financial aid file, which includes FAFSA, because as a graduate student, I still need to complete my FAFSA for other scholarships that I'm applying for. And then verification. Verification is something that students are selected for if there's some discrepancy on their FAFSA. For instance, like if they manually put in their income information, then at that point, sometimes you will get selected for verification. And that's just when the school is going to request like tax returns or W-2s or household size form from you or your parents. And once you complete that, they can process your financial aid file. But we'll go into that a little bit later. And then also scholarships. So create a scholarship checklist for all the documents that the scholarship is requesting. Okay. So for the FAFSA, everyone should fill out the FAFSA regardless of your income situation. So if you think your parents make a whole bunch of money and you don't think that you're going to receive any federal aid, you might not receive the Pell Grant, but you might still receive institutional money, which is like free money from your school. I've seen a lot of students. I also worked at ASU as a financial aid counselor, and even if they didn't qualify for the Pell Grant, they would qualify for institutional money, so money given from the school. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid, so you should not have to pay anyone, or you shouldn't have to pay to fill out the FAFSA. And you can start filling it out on October 1st of every single year. So that's when a new FAFSA application will be available for the next academic year. So right now you're going to see two FAFSAs. One is going to be for the 2021, and the other one's going to be the 21-22, which is for next academic year. And you're going to go to the government website. It's fafsa.ed.gov. And again, you might be eligible for money from your school and outside sources, so make sure you fill it out. Okay, so these are just some things that you and your parents are going to need. Have access to your email account as well as your parents' email account, just in case you need to check it for any reason. And then also, both of you should have an FSA ID. You as a student need to have an FSA ID, and your parent, also one of your parents, needs to have an FSA ID if they have a social security number. And both of you will need to remember your FSA ID and password to log into FAFSA and to electronically sign. You and your parent are going to need your FSA ID until you're 24 years old or you graduate from college, from undergrad. It's okay if your parent doesn't have a social security number, because there's a signature page option at the end of the FAFSA that can be printed and mailed. And then also remember your challenge questions when you're creating your FSA ID. Because if you don't have access to, say, like your email address or the phone that you had previously, then third option is using your challenge questions. And if you can answer those questions, you can update your password, log into your FSA ID account, and change your phone number, email, whatever you need to change. And if your email or phone number changes, update it in your FSA ID. Thank you. All right, so the FAFSA, again, is available on October 1st of every year, and you and your parents need to fill one out every single year. The FAFSA application covers you for fall, spring, and summer, and that's how the application starts. So for instance, right now we're in the fall of 2020, which means that the FAFSA application that we're in is 2020-2021. So that would cover student for fall of 2020, spring of 21, and summer 21. And then the next application will be for the fall of 21, spring of 22, and the summer of 22. So just keep that in mind. It just works like a regular school year. And then complete your FAFSA as soon as possible, because some awards are first come, first serve, like the FSEOG. If you are eligible for the Pell Grant, you might be eligible for the FSEOG, and you might get it. So these are some of the things you'll need to complete your FAFSA. You'll need an FSA ID for you and one of your parents. You and your parents' social security numbers. If you're not a US citizen, you would need the alien registration number on your permanent resident card. And then for the 21-22 FAFSA, you need the 2019 tax returns or 1040s, also known as 1040s, and then 2019 W-2s. So you can either use these documents to manually input the tax information onto your FAFSA, or to use the data retrieval tool. Also, bank statements and records of investment, if applicable. If those don't pertain to you, or your parents don't know, what the bank statements and records of investment are, then at that point it probably doesn't apply to them. And then records of untaxed income, again, if applicable. So for the data retrieval tool, basically what this is it's a tool on the FAFSA application where you can log in to your parents, or using your parents' FSA ID. Your parents can actually pull their tax return information from the IRS website into the FAFSA. What this does is it reduces your chances of being selected for something called verification. We talked about that briefly. So for instance, if you pull in your tax information, there's a lower risk of the information being inaccurate, or they're changing in the process of hitting the next button, or whatever it might be. But it reduces your chances of being selected for verification. And again, verification is when the federal government might select you. So Department of Ed might select you, and then the school will request documents on their behalf and make any changes to your FAFSA, if there's any changes that they need to make. And some of those items, again, might be like a tax return transcripts or 1040s. verification worksheet, which is basically like telling people who's in your household or telling the school who's in your household, and then W-2s. So just keep that in mind. So verification, again, I know a lot of times people say like once you submit your FAFSA that it's done. I have a lot of students who make that assumption too, not because they don't check their student center, and sometimes that happens. One, there's like two ways you could go basically. One way, the first one is you submit your FAFSA, school gets it, and everything's fine and you're good to go. The other one is you get selected for verification, then you just have to take an extra step. So sometimes, again, schools will request a tax return transcript or W-2 or 1040, and maybe a household form. But again, if given the option, always use a data retrieval tool in FAFSA because it fills in all the tax information and it minimizes your chances of being selected for verification. Otherwise, you would have to submit documents to your school, like for South Mountain Community College or any of the Maricopa community colleges. Once students are admitted, we receive their FAFSA. We always advise them, check your student center for any to-do list items that you need to complete. Same goes for ASU, U of A, NAU, UCLA, Brown, wherever you decide to go. If you're selected for verification, then you want to check your student center to see if there's any additional documentation you need to submit. Otherwise, it holds up your financial aid awards and dispersing your awards. And again, the FAFSA award years, 2020, 2021, for the seniors out there that are like, hey, you know what? I want to enroll in the summer of 2021. So after I graduate in May, I want to start classes in June. You can do that. You can absolutely do that. You just have to fill out the 2021 FAFSA so that you can enroll in the summer of 2021. Otherwise, if you're like, you know what, I'm going to take a little bit of a vacation, a little break in between graduating and starting, then you want to complete the fall, the 21-22 FAFSA, which covers you again for the fall of 21, spring of 22, and summer 22. So not sure if we can move on. So percentage of students who receive financial aid, 75%. So a majority of your peers are awarded financial aid in the form of grants and scholarships. So keep that in mind. A lot of people are getting awarded. And next. So as a PhD student, as a student in general, I still complete my FAFSA every single year. In fact, I completed mine on October 1st when the FAFSA opened, so I could just get it done and get it out of the way. Also because I get really excited about completing FAFSA. Anyway, so one of the things that helps you determine what your if you qualify for financial aid is the estimated family contribution. And so the EFC is a formula that's created by the federal government to calculate from your FAFSA to calculate your EFC. So schools use the EFC to determine what you're eligible for as far as federal student aid, and then also to determine your need. And EFC also considers other things like your family's taxed and untaxed income, family size, and a number of family members who will attend college. So for instance, the way that I use my EFC and my cost of attendance and everything at ASU to figure out how much financial aid or extra scholarships and grants I can receive is I take my cost of attendance at ASU and subtract my EFC, which is from the FAFSA, and that tells me what my need is. So at South Mountain, for instance, South Mountain Community College, if you take 12 or more credit hours, well, I guess 12 credit hours exactly, it's going to cost a student like $2,094, but this was, I think, last year. And then estimated books and supplies, $12.88. I've not spent $12.88 in books as far as I can remember in any semester, but that's just an estimate. Other expenses like personal expenses, transportation, all of that are also included here. So they try to bulk up this number, and as you can see at the bottom, it says $9,826. That's not what a student will have to pay, but that's the estimated cost of attendance. So let's go to the next slide. And then same thing with ASU. So ASU, of course, their total, there's $29,578. So theirs is much higher because it includes room and board at a little over 13,000. And the next one. So the reason why need is important and why EFC and cost of attendance, all of that stuff is important, is because, so for instance, my cost of attendance at ASU is $32,980. I don't pay that every year that I'm at ASU. That's just the cost of attendance, and it's an estimate. So this includes actually tuition and fees for $12,608, housing and meals at $11,808. And I don't believe that I spend like, yeah, I don't spend like that much in housing or maybe even meals, but yeah, that's the estimate there. And then books and supplies. I haven't spent over $1,000 for books at ASU since I've been there. And then transportation and other, which includes like personal expenses. So I take that amount, that number at the top, $32,980, and then next again. And this is my EFC. So this was my EFC from the previous year, 8,177. Y'all are probably going to have lower numbers than this because this is pretty high. And the next. So my need is $24,803. Next. This means I can receive this amount in grants, scholarships, and loans. And I don't want to take out this amount in loans, so I depend on grants and scholarships to help me. And next again. So again, my EFC, here's my cost of attendance, $32,980. Next. That's my EFC. So now I know this is my need. This is how much money I need basically to achieve my cost of attendance. Next again. So that's how much, again, I can get in grants and scholarships. My tuition waiver at ASU is $10,810, and I subtract that for my need. My health insurance is $2,066. Again, that's subtracted for my need. And again, I don't pay for tuition or health insurance. That's all through my PhD funding. But I did receive a university graduate grant last fall semester for $5,000, which means that for the spring, I could receive up to $6,927 in grants and scholarships or student loans if I wanted to, but I don't want student loans ever. So I actually received, I think it was $1,000 in the spring semester. So I still had $5,927 that I could apply for in grants and scholarships or loans. But yeah, so that's how I use my need. I'm gonna go next again. All right. Now, as far as scholarships, I talk about that a lot because I'm always constantly applying for scholarships. So some scholarships are merit-based and others are need-based, but both may require the FAFSA and financial aid file in order to receive funding. So again, make a checklist of the documents you need for the scholarship, and then also create like an awesome essay. Just make it super solid and ask other people to proofread it for you to ensure that it sounds good. And that they understand it. And then put all deadlines in your planner or your phone, and send everything out in a timely manner. All right. So there's billions of dollars in grants and scholarships available in the United States. And even though I don't get every single scholarship that I apply for, I still constantly apply for grants and scholarships because I've been denied maybe about 3 grants or scholarships in my entire academic career, and that includes undergrad, my master's degree, and my PhD. And I've received lots and lots of money. So keep applying, because there's a lot of students who just like fill out the preliminary information, or they forget to submit their transcript, or they forget something else. And then you could be that person that has everything completed and get the scholarship. So really quickly, I just need to talk about loans. Now, as far as loans, they're part of your financial aid award package. Every school has to offer them to you. And they're going to offer you the subsidized loan, unsubsidized loan, and then private student loans are from like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, basically just financial institutions. So for subsidized loans, these do not accrue interest while you're in school, while unsubsidized loan, once the loan has been applied to your balance or it's dispersed, then it starts to accrue interest. While the subsidized loan doesn't accrue interest while you're in school, but it starts to accrue interest once you graduated, or if you just decide to leave school completely. But just keep in mind, if you need to take a loan, take out the subsidized first. If that's not enough, take out the unsubsidized loan after that. Try to avoid private student loans because they're credit-based loans, and you need to apply for these loans with a private bank, and there's no guarantee you'll be approved. So just keep that in mind. And also they have higher interest rates, which means that you're paying basically more than what you've taken out. All right, and just a few tips. If you're a high school student, or any student actually, you can request a FERPA release form if you want your parents to talk to financial aid or anyone else on your behalf. Don't take out more money than you need in student loans. There's still loans and you have to pay them back. If you only need to take out $100 to cover a balance, or to cover your remaining balance or whatever it is, don't take out the full amount that they're offering you. You can contact the financial aid award office and say like, hey, I only need, $100, and they can fix that for you. They can take care of it. They can update it and, do what they need to do on their end. And also stay on top of your scholarship application deadlines. Also, ask questions. Please ask questions. As a financial aid counselor and working in financial aid for like 3-4 years, I think, ask some questions about your cost of attendance, your EFC, and your remaining needs, so you know where you're at. And then if you have a special circumstance, for instance, a lot of parents are unfortunately losing their jobs right now. A lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people, their income has decreased since last year. And so you can actually contact your financial aid office and say, hey, my parents' income decreased more than 25%. Can I submit a special circumstances form, or a form like a parent income reduction form, so that it actually reflects what my parents are making now as opposed to making a year ago? And they can help you with that too. There are processes and special forms for these special circumstances. So just some common misconceptions. Your parents are not responsible for paying for your education. And you can't take out a loan in your parents' name. So if your parents are like, no, I don't want to give you my social security number, the FAFSA is not running their credit. They're not doing anything with their social. They're basically just ensuring that your parent can sign your FAFSA electronically, so it's quicker and easier. And then you're not required to pay the EFC ever. So the estimated expected family contribution, you're not required to pay that. A couple of other tips: you can request a lower meal plan or no meal plan and ask about the most affordable housing option on campus, or you can live with your parents at home. So there's just some things that to keep in mind. All right, and then I believe this is the last slide here. So October 1st, FAFSA opens, and this is just to show you July 1st of the next year, so for instance, 2020 to 2021, this was this year, the students completed their application and verification by July 1st, they were given priority. And then classes start, and then they start. But sometimes you have those students who start in the spring. If they complete their financial aid file and FAFSA and everything's done by November 1st, then they're given priority for the spring. And it just depends on when you complete your financial aid file. So if you complete it, if you complete your FAFSA early and you complete any verification that the school's requesting before July 1st, and you intend on starting in the fall and completing through spring and summer, you just have to do it that one time and it's taken care of. And this is my information here. So if you want to just take a picture of that, I'm totally fine with that. I work on Mondays and Tuesdays, so I'm part-time at South Mountain from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I have one-on-one appointments available. And I also do FAFSA workshops every Tuesday from 12 to 1 and Tuesday from 5 to 6.
Okay, so does anyone have any questions for Delphina so far? Okay.
This is Agnes. I do have a question.
Okay.
So my question is, what are some of the ways to educate or inform parents about the FAFSA process? Because I know many times it's on the burden of the student to apply along with the parent, but are there opportunities, or what are some ways that you've been able to include parents in that discussion?
It really depends on how involved the parent wants to get. I mean, you have some parents who are like, active and want to ask every single question, and I love that. I love answering any and all questions that parents have. Sometimes you also have parents that don't know what to ask, and so what I do is I tell them what the process is as far as completing FAFSA. Giving them, it'll take 3 to 5 business days for the school to receive your student's FAFSA. At that point, they need to check their student center to see if there's anything the school's requesting. If the school's requesting it, submit it as soon as possible, and then ask the school how long it's going to take. I give them like the timeline and the processes of how long like an application might take. But then I also provide parents with, I mean, it's hard to answer that question because it just depends on the parents and like how involved they want to get. Yeah. Did you have like a specific instance?
No, just that, well, I'm with the University of Arizona, and many times we have students who are challenged with trying to navigate the financial aid process, and then we'll have parents who are asking questions, and so we'll go through the process of making sure that they contact the financial aid officer and have the permission for parents to be involved in the process. But it seems like there's always more and more questions regarding FAFSA itself and how parents should be involved, or as you said, what kind of questions to ask. Because I was in a similar situation as you were, to where I had to fill out everything and get input all the information. So now it's now parents are more involved, but we still have students with parents who may not be as involved, or that discussion hasn't come up. And the other thing we always face is when students just do not get enough aid. Right now, it's registration season. There's have like unpaid balances.
Yeah.
And what are some options they have in this late in the It's usually loans now because almost all aid has been dispersed or taken advantage of. So it's always
Yeah.
in, you know, and having students just being comfortable in asking those questions.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I learned at ASU as a financial aid counselor is that one of my supervisor was amazing. He was just an incredible supervisor, and my supervisors at South Mountain are just awesome. They work in financial aid. You know, they're just incredible people. And so whenever there's a student that comes to me or comes to our department or that came to our department with their concern, like, hey, I have a $1,500 balance and I can't pay this. I don't want to take out student loans because, you know, I want to graduate without debt, or I'm trying to, you know, like this came up. I don't know, whatever the student situation, if there was an issue with them paying the amount, every school has their own money. My supervisor at ASU is like, okay, Delphina, go ahead and give them, you know, an extra 1,500 in the university grant, because we can afford to give them that if it means that they're going to succeed in the semester. Or at South Mountain, my supervisors are both like, you know, we have a little bit of a cushion in emergency funding for students who can't pay this, especially during COVID or pandemic times. It's just up to the student to contact financial aid and say, you know what, can I have additional money, or is there additional money somewhere where you can help me out this semester? And then next semester, maybe I'll apply for Navajo Nation scholarship, or maybe I'll contact Pascua Yaqui and ask them for funding. And so it's just a matter of like talking to financial aid and seeing if people like supervisors or anyone are willing to help out the student. And let's see, Jerry, should I do the FAFSA walkthrough?
Sure, I think that would be good.
Okay, so I'm just going to walk through the 21-22 FAFSA, and I'm going to share my screen. Oh, I think you would have to give me access.
There we go.
Perfect. Okay, can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so this is just basic demo site. Anyone can access this. If you go to fafsademo.test.ed.gov here at the top. So it's fafsademo.test.ed.gov. So this is for mostly like educators or people that want to see different scenarios when it comes to FAFSA. And this is what I typically use whenever I do any of these presentations. So I'm going to use a new application, new user, no prior data. And basically it gives you the username and the password. And here at the bottom where it says FAFSA on the web demo site, this is the demonstration website that it provides you. And I'm going to use just one that I've been using for a while. And I had one of these demonstrations that I was doing for a high school last night. And right before I logged in, I checked to see if it was clear and we were good to go. And it was. And then when I went to do the demonstration, it was just like someone had already used it. But basically, when you log into the FAFSA, essentially what happens is you're going to come across that disclaimer that you saw just a minute ago. And with the disclaimer, you're just going to accept. It's basically saying, hey, we just want to make sure that, you know, this is you, and that you're applying for federal aid in order to attend school. So yeah, that's what that little disclaimer is for. And when you log into the FAFSA, you're going to actually, here it is, the disclaimer. Warning, you're accessing a US federal government computer system. So you're just going to accept. And then when you log into the FAFSA for the first time ever, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see, and especially on October 1st, moving like forward and after, I should say, you're going to see two FAFSAs. You're going to see the 21-22 and the 2020-21. So we're going to go ahead and start the 2021 FAFSA, and essentially you're going to create a save key here. So if at any point during the FAFSA application process you decide, oh, I'm going to save here and then I'll come back later, when you log into the FAFSA again, and access your application, it's going to ask you for a save key. And you can basically put in anything you want here. For instance, I just put in 1, 2, 3, 4. You could put that in. You can put all zeros. You can put 4 zeros. You can put 6 zeros. You can put any number of zeros you want. Whatever you prefer, whatever you will remember, but only that you'll know. So that you can access your save key. You can even, or access your application. You can even put in like a whole password if you wanted to. And then once you're done with that, you click next. And on the next screen, it's going to provide you with like a little intro. I'm just going to close. All right, so yeah, the introduction, we can go ahead and click next here. And then when you create an FSA ID, which is the first step in completing your or starting your FAFSA, you're gonna put it, it's gonna ask you for your social security number, name, all of this information, the demographic data, and you're just basically gonna look through and say like, yeah, this is all right. This is correct information. And you're going to click next. And you're just going to verify your email address and put in your password, or sorry, your phone number. And then make sure your address is correct, because this is already pre-filled with, you know, someone else's data. I'm just going to make it relevant to Arizona. Yep, that's right. And let me make this a little bit bigger. All right. So have I lived in Arizona for 5 years? This is you as a student. If you have, say yes. If not, say no. And then it's going to ask you what your state of legal residence was prior to living in Arizona, and if you became a legal resident of Arizona before that date. So for me, I'm going to say yes, I've lived here for 5 years. Are you a U.S. citizen? If you're a U.S. citizen, you're going to select that. If you're an eligible non-citizen, you would select that and put your alien registration number in here. But I'm a U.S. citizen, so we're going to select that. And then for high school completion status, if you're out of high school and you're going to be graduating in May, then you're most likely receiving your high school diploma. There's also the GED, or state authorized high school equivalent certificate, and then the homeschooled option. So you do need to have your high school diploma or GED by the time you graduate from, by the time you decide to attend college, I should say. And then what college or degree or certificate will you be working on? So this is completely up to you. If you're attending university right out of high school, you want to select first bachelor's degree. But if you're attending a community college, and then for 2 years, and then you'll attend, you know, a university after those 2 years, then you're either going to select associate's degree, which is occupational technical program, or associate's degree, general ed, or transfer program. And then the other options here are like a certificate or diploma. So there's also programs where you can receive a certificate, or it's part of a technical program that are less than 2 years, and that's available there. And then these other programs, I don't think a lot of students are going to be applying for graduate school right out of high school. If so, that's awesome. But yeah, so I'm going to go with associate's degree, general education transfer program. Will you have your first bachelor's degree before you begin 21-22 school year? No, you should not have your bachelor's degree by then. And if you do, that's pretty cool. What will your college grade level be? So most students, even if you're doing dual enrollment, you're actually going to select never attended college first year, because dual enrollment doesn't necessarily count as like taking as attending college necessarily, because you're still in high school basically. So students should be selecting never attended college first year, and if you're already in college, then maybe your second year, sophomore or junior. Are you interested in work study? So work study is like working on campus and getting paid. Basically, when you do federal work study, the school pays you for doing your work like every 2 weeks or whenever they, pay people. You're just going to be on the payroll and you would get paid for the work that you do. You'd have to apply at the school for the federal work study job, get interviewed, get hired, all of that stuff in order to do federal work study. But the reason it's asking this is because the Department of Education or the federal government pays a portion of those wages. So if you're interested in work study, then you should say yes. If you're considering it, say yes. If you're like, I don't know, maybe, I would say yes. The reason I'm saying that is because if you say no or don't know and you decide later on in the year, you know what, I want to do federal work study, I wanted to work on campus, you're going to have to go into your FAFSA, change this question to yes, resubmit it, wait for the school to receive it, the school receives it, then they post your work study award in your financial aid account or with your financial aid awards. And then at that point, you can start applying for jobs and get hired and all of that and continue the process. So if you're even slightly considering it, say yes. But if you're just like, no, I absolutely do not want to work, then say no. And if you're female, you would pick female. If you are male, basically male citizens and immigrants have to register with Selective Service in order to receive federal student aid. So if you are unsure if you're registered with Selective Service, then you're going to say no. And then it's going to ask if you want us to register you, then you say yes. So if you are absolutely 100% sure that you're registered with Selective Service, then say yes. But if you're like, I don't know, say no, and then they can register you. And if you're under 18, they'll register you on your birthday. Driver's license number, if you have one, you can put it in here. But if you don't, you just click next. And are you a foster youth or were you at any time in the foster care system? That's a question that you would need to answer. I'm going to say no. High school completed by parent. If you don't know what your parents' highest level completed, then you would just select other/unknown. And then if one of your parents completed middle school, high school, whatever it is, you would select one of those options and then go next. So what is the name of your high school? You don't have to put in like the full name. I went to Holbrook High School, so I'm going to put in Holbrook, and the city is in Holbrook and the state is in Arizona. And I just click confirm. So now it's going to do a search and generate all of the schools that are in Holbrook with the word Holbrook in it. And so there's Holbrook High School. And next. And so for the colleges, every school has a federal school code. Like for instance, South Mountain, their federal school code is 015001. And so when I put in the federal school code, it pops up here and I'll just check the box. But then you can actually add more schools. And what I do for students, or what I tell students to do, is I tell them, if you're attending a community college in Arizona, you can actually just select the state and then type in community college in the school name. And all schools that have the words community college in it will pop up. And so you can go through this and say like, yeah, you know what, maybe I want to attend Glendale. And you can list up to 10 schools. So just keep that in mind. And you can add more schools too. So we'll go to university, for example. That's another thing that I tell students to type in if they're thinking of attending any schools or any of the big schools in Arizona. So like, for instance, NAU, maybe U of A, and then ASU is always at the bottom for some reason here, where it's like it's Arizona State, but it shows up at the bottom of the list. All right, so then let's go ahead and continue. And you can do that with other schools too. Like for instance, if you want to go to a school in California, you can put the school name University of California, because there's a whole bunch of them you can choose from. Like UCLA is there. Maybe you want to go to UC Berkeley. And then once you're done, you just click next, or you can add more schools. Again, you can add up to 10 schools. And if you're thinking of attending these schools, you should definitely add them, even if you haven't been accepted, just so they have your FAFSA on file, just in case. For community colleges, because community colleges don't really have housing or dorms, then your two options are basically with parent or off campus. For a lot of these schools, with parent means that you're going to be living with your parent. If you're off campus, it means that you're going to be living in an apartment by yourself or with a roommate, or you're going to be living with your brother or sister, and you're going to be paying rent then off campus. So I'll just say off campus for the community colleges. And then as far as as universities, we're going to go ahead and select on campus, because if you have the option to live on campus and you get funding for it, that would be really cool. So select on campus and go next. So this question, and I want to highlight this part here where it says application was successfully saved. So my application was saved because I completed a section. So each time you complete an entire section, it'll automatically save your application. FAFSA's been having some issues lately where it's been popping up with a message saying unexpected error and then kicking students out of their application. So the section they completed before was saved, but the next section that they were working on, that wasn't saved. So make sure that you continuously save. I know I wasn't saving continuously, but I guess I was just hoping that it would save my application. All right, so for this section, what is your marital status as a student? FAFSA doesn't care if you have like a partner, a boyfriend, girlfriend, whomever. They basically just they care if you're married or separated or divorced. And so I'm single. Let's say that. And then, do you have children? So do you have children now, or will you have children between July 1st, 2021 or June 30th, 2022? So for those students who, sometimes you have students who get pregnant and they're going to have their baby in between that period, then they would say, yeah, I will have a child between that time. Or students don't have children, that's fine too. Do you have dependents? So if you have dependents, basically other than your children and not your spouse, so not your spouse or your children, you wouldn't include them here. Dependents would be like other people who live with you that you provide more than half of their support. So like, for instance, if you were taking care of like cousins, nieces, nephews, moms, dads, aunts, uncles, whoever, then they would be considered your dependents. But if not, say no, that's fine. And a lot of students, I don't think that this is going to apply to a lot of high school students, because it's asking if you're serving on active duty currently, or if you're a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces. But then there's other students who these last three questions might apply to. So at any time since you turned age 13, were both of your parents deceased, or were you in foster care, or were you a dependent or ward of the court? So if any of these apply to you, you would check that you would select that box there. Or if determined or as determined by a court if you're in your state of legal residence, are you or were you an emancipated minor? And if you were, again, you would check that box. Does someone other than your parent or step parent have legal guardianship of you as determined by a court in your state of legal residence? So this term here, legal guardianship, is really important because if someone else does have legal guardianship of you, they'll have court papers with the heading legal guardianship or something in the court papers that'll say that that person does have legal guardianship of you. But if you have like a notarized letter from your parents saying like, yeah, this person, you know, the student lives with their aunt or uncle, sometimes that doesn't work. It really depends on the school. Some schools accept those letters, some schools don't. It really just depends. And this is to determine your dependency status, to see if you're an independent student, which means that you don't need to provide parent information, or if you're a dependent student, in which case you do need to provide parent information. So these are important questions. And if you don't know how to answer these, you can talk to maybe like your high school counselor. You can contact me. You can ask other people and see if this is something that does apply to you. But if they don't apply to you, say none of the above. So on or after July 1st, 2020, were you homeless or were you self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? Sorry, I can't read right now. But yes or no. So I'll say no. And I'm only saying no and yes to these questions so we can get to this. Basically, I'll provide information about my parents saying, hey, you're considered an independent student, so you have to provide parent information. If you get to this section and say, oh, my parents aren't available right now, do not select I am unable to provide parent information. Because if you select this option, then you're only going to be eligible for unsubsidized loans. So if your parent isn't available when you're completing FAFSA, just pause here, because the next section is going to be parent demographics, and this is all parent information. So if you don't have your parents' marital status, the day they got married, any of that stuff, or their social or any of it, then I would just click save and then log out, log back in when you have that information. So as of today, what is the marital status of your parents? So if your parents were never married and you're in a single parent household, then it's going to ask you which of your parents' information will be provided. So you can provide father's or mother's information. If your biological parents are unmarried and both parents are living together, you would select that option. There's also married or remarried. I had an interesting question the other day with a parent who was separated. He used the word separated from his ex-wife. He said, oh, my daughter's mom and I are separated. And that led me to believe like a bunch of other things. But anyway, so daughter lives with dad. Dad actually got remarried a couple of years ago or something, and so he's now remarried, so as of today. And so I always tell people, as of today, what is your marital status? Like if I was single today and I got married tomorrow, then my status would still be single today. But tomorrow, if I completed my FAFSA, then I would be married. So it really just depends as of today. So if your biological parents got divorced and the biological parent that you live with now got remarried, they're remarried. And so make sure that you put the correct marital status of your parents. Same goes for divorce or separated. They don't necessarily, your parents don't have to be legally separated in order to select this option. If they're just separated, living in separate households, then it's going to ask when your parents became divorced or separated. And then also which parent information you're going to be providing. Same with widowed. So if your parent recently became widowed or was widowed within the last year, and they haven't remarried, then that's when you would select this option and which of your parents' information you're going to be providing. So for this FAFSA, I'm just going to select unmarried and both legal parents living together. And because I don't have a fake parent social security number, we're just going to go ahead and put all zeros, but you should not put all zeros. You should put your parent's social security number if they have one. And, you know, their last name, first initial. So my first name, well, I don't know why that keeps doing that. Okay. My first name is Delphina, so my first initial starts with a D. Sometimes students will read that and see, oh, middle initial. No, put your parents' first name, first initial, their first name. And then date of birth, we'll put, let's see, what's the date? Whoop, just putting in some random dates of birth here because I don't have any children and I don't know how old you'd have to be to have an 18-year-old. Yeah. Okay. And I'm just going to put my, and then we're pretending to put in a social here. Then we'll just put same here. All right, and so once you've done that, you're just going to put in your parents' state of legal residence. So if they've lived here for 5 years, say yes. If not, say no. And then where they had their legal residence before. And if they became legal residents of their state before January 1st, 2016. But again, for this purpose, I'm just going to say, yeah, they've lived here for 5 years. So household size is really important because a lot of parents and students get confused about this because they have older siblings who are away at college or live in a different apartment, but their parents still pay for the apartment. It's like there's a whole bunch of scenarios. Basically, if your parent, if you have siblings, and your parents provide more than half of their support from July 1st, 2021 through June 30th of 2022, or those children can answer no to all of these questions here where it says dependency status questions on FAFSA, then you're going to include them in the household. So say you have two other siblings, one is 10 and one is 21, but the 21-year-old still relies on your parents for more than half of their support, like your parents pay for their apartment, utilities, all of that stuff, you're going to include them. And then other people that live in your household, if they live with your parents now, your parents provide more than half of their support, and your parents will continue to provide more than half of their support from July 1st, 2021 until June 30th, 2022. So these are people like, for instance, we have, there's multi-generational households out there where parents will take care of their parents or maybe their nieces and nephews. So like your cousins, aunts and uncles. So let's say your grandparents or your parents are taking care of one of your nieces and a grandparent. You can include them in the households here, as long as they're providing more than half of their support. And then the number in college. Let's say one of your siblings is in college and maybe your cousin is also in college and you're in college. You would include all three people, or maybe it's just you in college. You would put a 1 there. So it really just depends. If people are in college and your parents are supporting them, make sure that you're including them here. And this is always a very interesting part of the FAFSA presentation because this situation is always different for people. So if your parents have filed taxes for 2019, you're going to say, yeah, my parents already completed their taxes. And then if your parents have a social security number, you're going to select IRS 1040. But if your parents do not have social security numbers and you put all zeros in for their social security number because they don't have social security numbers, but they have, say, a tax ID, which starts with a 9, and you can see that on their tax returns, you would select foreign tax return. And I don't know why it doesn't show the third drop down, but the third drop down is going to ask about your parents' tax filing status. And tax filing status is essentially what your parents said that their filing status is. So if they're married, then they file married jointly or married separately. If your parents are single and claim you as a dependent on their taxes, then they probably claimed head of household. But if they're, sometimes they might choose single as a filing status. And then there's also qualifying widow. Again, I don't know why it doesn't show me here at the bottom, but we'll go ahead and click next. Okay, so also the other option, this is where you're going to see the option for the data retrieval tool. I talked about this earlier, but the IRS data retrieval tool, if your parents either filed like head of household and they're single, they're not married, they're not remarried, then they're eligible to use the data retrieval tool. If they filed married jointly for their taxes, then they're eligible as well. I believe qualifying widow is eligible. If they're single, they didn't get married or remarried, then they can use the data retrieval tool. It really just depends, but this will tell you here, it'll say like you're eligible to use the data retrieval tool, and at which case, or at which point you can actually click use data retrieval tool and then just follow the prompts. And also make sure that you have your parents' tax returns so that you could see what address they use, because sometimes parents move, or sometimes they'll use like a PO box, or I had a student that I helped the other day who uses her parents' home address because she said like she feels more comfortable with them getting her mail there. So make sure that you use whatever address is on the tax returns, either for your parents or for yourself. Otherwise, it's going to kick you out and say, nope, sorry, that information is incorrect. So yeah. And if you do complete this part manually, make sure that you click on these little circles here, the little blue circles with the question mark, because it'll tell you exactly where to look. So what was your parents' adjusted gross income for 2019? So then when you click on this, it'll ask you the question here, but then it'll tell you where you can find the answer. And it'll show you here 8B. So then you go on your parents' tax returns, and this is what it'll look like, your parents' tax returns, and you're going to put in whatever number is in here. And so I'm just, again, making up numbers. So if you're in a single parent household, you're only going to see, I don't think you'll see a box in here, but I believe you do. But if you're in, you have two parents, then it's going to ask how much did parent 1 earn and parent 2 earn. And what you'll want to do is look at box 1. I'm going to show you again. So it'll tell you where to look for that information. Generally, it's going to be in box 1 here under working wages, but then sometimes it'll tell you if your parents have a Schedule 1, then they're going to have to look at number 3 and number 6 as well if they have farm income, and also like self-employment. So just keep that in mind, that there are these little question marks right next to them, and it'll tell you if your parent didn't file taxes, then you can put in 2019. Also, really important thing, if your parents didn't work in 2019 and they didn't file taxes, then you can actually just select not going to file, because they didn't earn any income, so why would they file taxes? And then the next question will say like, well, what's their wages? And then you're just gonna put in a 0 if they didn't file taxes, or if they didn't work and, you know, didn't earn income, then they had no wages. So we'll just say each parent made $10,000 in 2019. And this will ask if either of your parents are a dislocated worker. And again, you can click on this and it'll say exactly, it'll tell you exactly what a dislocated worker is. So generally it's a person that's receiving unemployment because they were laid off. So keep that in mind. And then, you know, it gives you all of the different scenarios where a dislocated worker might have, you know, lost their job, or what that looks like, what their situation is. So, but if your parents are still working, they've been working their job for a long time, you're just going to say no. And then in 2019 or 2020, did your parents or anyone in your parents' household receive benefits? So there's Medicaid, there's also Social Security income. So that could be like Social Security income, and also SNAP. Here, this is food stamps. But if you have like younger siblings, sometimes they also receive free or reduced lunch. And also TANF and WIC. So this is usually for babies and like small children. But if your parents received any of these items, then select whichever ones they received, or your parents, you, or anyone in your household. And that includes, again, like grandparents or cousins, nieces, nephews, whoever's living in your household that your parents support. And again, enter the amount of your parents' income tax returns, or income tax. And so you'll go here and it'll tell you exactly where to look, but it'll say income tax paid is the total amount of IRS form 1040 line 14 minus schedule 2 line 2. So you would go here to your parents' 1040, look for line 14, and subtract, if they have a schedule 2, subtract line 2 from this amount, and that'll tell you. But if they're zeros, then your parents will have 0 there. Most of these probably don't apply to like a lot of parents or students, but I would suggest reading through these if you're with your parents, and if they don't have any of this, then basically it doesn't apply to them and you can just leave the zeros there. On this question here, it'll ask what the payments to tax-deferred pension and retirement savings plan are. So your parent would just look at their W-2 in boxes 12A through 12D and look for these codes, D, E, F, G, H, and S. And if there's a number next to it, they would, if they have like a D and an E, add those two together and put it here. If they have a double D, don't put that in. No double D. And yeah, that's usually the most common one that I see from parents. And this is asking if your parents' total assets exceed $7,100. This amount's going to be different for every student. Sometimes it'll say 0, sometimes it'll say like 12,000 or 500 or whatever it might be. But basically, you just answer this question with your parent. If it doesn't, say no. If it does, it's going to ask you what their balance is of cash, savings, and checking. Also, if your parents have investment in real estate, so like if they have the home that you live in where they pay mortgage, and then they have other homes where they rent them out to get money as another form of income, then that would pertain to them. And also, if your parents have a business or investment farm, they would put it here, their amount of their net worth for that. They wouldn't include like a family business or farm with 100 or fewer people. So we'll just say no. And for you as the student, same questions will apply to you. If you say already completed, you're going to select that. I'm going to say not going to file because a lot of students I've seen don't have jobs. And then how much did you earn from working wages? So $0 because yeah, And most of the times, again, these don't apply for students. If you don't have money in your cash savings or checking account, you just put a 0 there. If you don't have any real estate investments, you can put a 0 there. If you don't have a business or investment farm, put a 0 there. Put zeros. Oh. Yeah, sometimes, oh no, encountered an error. Okay, give me a second. I'll log back in. That was the error that I was talking about earlier. I've seen a lot of students get that error for some reason, and it's really disappointing because we'll be like getting our FAFSA done together, and then, you know, that message pops up and we have to log back in. But again, let's see where it left us, because it should be saving. All right, so we're going to continue. My save key was 1234 for this application, so I'm just going to put that in, and that's what happens. That's a good like example of your save key and how when you need it. So basically, if you get kicked out, or if something happens, then that's where you put in your save key. So again, we're going to say not going to file. And we're almost done here. So as soon as we're done, I will go ahead and answer any and all questions y'all might have. Again, putting in zeros here because this student has no money. Go ahead and save. Oh no, why? Why? Sorry, y'all, just keeps kicking me out. And this doesn't happen all the time. There might be someone else that's trying to gain access to this FAFSA. So they might come in here and say like, oh, I'm gonna use this John last name FAFSA profile, and then that's why they're kicking me out. So that's a possibility. Okay, not going file. I'm gonna go back over here. And you should not do this, by the way. I'm just doing this, so you shouldn't change like your parents' income or anything like that. Put it as you see it. I'm only doing this because for some reason, this is why there's an error every time I try to get onto the next page. So and I just want to show you the sign and submit. Okay, perfect. Application was successfully saved. Are you a preparer? Preparer is someone that you pay to do your FAFSA for you, and you should never have to pay anyone to help you with your FAFSA or help you complete your FAFSA. So just keep that in mind. And you're just going to look over this summary and say like, yep, all of this information is correct. Yes. And this is why you and one of your parents need an FSA ID. So for you, basically you would read this, read it through, make sure that you agree to the terms. And once you agree, you're going to click next, sign this FAFSA, and then provide parent signature. So the same thing should pop up for the parent if they have a social security number and an FSA ID. But for those students whose parents don't have social security numbers, you would just submit it without a signature and then click submit my FAFSA now. And then when you go back to the page, I'll show you where you can print the signature page. But this is what you should see once you and your parent both electronically sign, is this confirmation page. And this part here where it says expected family contribution, if this is all zeros here, it should be all zeros. I don't know why they put nines there, but this is the amount that you would qualify for in the Pell Grant based on being enrolled in 12 credit hours or more. And your school will basically take this amount, divide it between 2 semesters. So in the first semester, they're going to give you half of this amount, and the second semester, they'll give you the other half. And that's again for 12 or more credit hours. And then you also see here that you have the direct Stafford loan. Stafford loan is the same thing as the subsidized and unsubsidized loan, basically. But you're offered $5,500 for that. So that's what they're providing to you. And again, if your parent needs to sign, or sometimes they might have issues with their FSA ID, in that case, you can select submit without signature. And here's where you would print off the signature page. And signature page takes a lot longer. I think it takes like 10 business days or more to actually get processed, to process your FAFSA. So Department of Ed would receive this, scan the barcode, and then your parents actually need to sign here and date it, and you would mail it to this address here at the bottom. And then once that's done, again, Department of Ed will go ahead and use that barcode. And yeah, I believe that is it. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Thank you, Delphina. That was a really good in-depth tutorial that we saw. And there was one question, mostly for me. So I didn't do, the last time I did my FAFSA was like maybe 3 years ago. And since then, I sort of forgot my login information. And knowing that I don't need my parents anymore, I forgot my FSA ID, my password, even the challenge questions or which email I used. So like just starting from like the where would I start in order to like start editing like my profile?
Yeah, if you, let's see, could you share your settings with, or the settings, or share screen? Okay, perfect. All right, so first place that anyone should go if they have issues with their information is go to fsaid.ed.gov. And this is a completely different website than FAFSA. So this is where you would create your FSA ID if you don't have one. But if you do have one, you can click Manage My FSA ID. And here, if you forgot your username, there's a button there where you can click Forgot My Username. And you said that if you don't know which email you used, you can actually check any and all emails that you have and your date of birth. And it'll pop up with that saying like, hey, here's the email address that you use. So for instance, like the email address I use, my personal one, and so, I mean, if anyone tries to like change my password or something after this, then, you know, obviously I'll know that it's fake. But yeah, so then in a separate email, then essentially I get an email and I'll put in my secure code. But there's also other options. So like forgot my username, you can text. So if you use like, well, I mean, if you would have to have the same phone number. So if you've used, you know, the same phone, then basically you would put in your phone number or your date of birth. And then challenge questions, if you don't know your challenge questions, again, you have to put in your social security, last name, and date of birth. But if not, the other thing that I do is I go to I Google Department of Education chat. That's what I put in Google, and I'll show you. So they have a chat with us function, which I think is the best. Like, this is the best website if you ever have any issues with FAFSA or your FSA ID, because you can actually just chat with someone instantly, and they ask you to verify some question, you know, some things like what's the email you used. And if you don't remember, you can say like, I don't remember, and they'll give you some hints. And then at that point, you know, a lot of times people will say like, oh, I didn't know that I used that email. I haven't used that in so long, but it's this. And then you can actually ask them to update it, and they'll update it for you. But I prefer the chat with us function versus calling the Department of Education, because sometimes their wait times are a lot longer when you call them. Also, if you're working with students, and sometimes the students don't know what to ask, and you're working with them one-on-one, you can actually do the chat yourself with the student with you, because you know the student's like sitting next to you, and you're like, hey, can I like chat with this person on your behalf? And they'll say yes. But when you call the Department of Education, and even if the student gives you permission, verbal permission, gives verbal permission to the Department of Ed and says like, yes, you can talk to this person, Department of Ed will refuse to talk to you if you're trying to help the student. And so you're just going to have to speak through the student. And yeah, sometimes that can be challenging. So if you're having any issues with your FSA ID login, you forgot the email, you got locked out and you can't get back in, yeah, use the web chat. It's a really great resource.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
No, Delphina, this is Kimberly. I apologize for coming. I came in a little bit late on the webinar session. But I have actually well, I'll just start off with number one question.
Okay.
So I have, and these are just some things that came to mind as I was listening to your presentation, some issues and challenges that some of our students have experienced. But you had mentioned that if the student has no parent available whenever they put their information in, to not click on just no parent available, because they only qualify for unsubsidized loans. So my question is, would it be better if the student provides their parent information also? Would they get more funding available to them if they provided their parent information versus not providing any parent information?
Well, I mean, I think your question, it depends on the student situation. So for instance, there's a lot of scenarios where a student cannot provide parent information. On the FAFSA, there's a section where it asks dependency questions. So sometimes students' parents are deceased and they can't provide their parent information, in which case it was the screen before that screen where I was going over the dependency questions. So in any situation, you know, a student could be in foster care, they could be living with another family member who might have legal guardianship of them. So it really depends on their situation. Or sometimes they come, you know, I've had students who come from abusive households where they can't provide parent information because if they go back, it's not safe for them. In which case they would answer, you know, the question, like if they're homeless, they would answer that question. So it's not a requirement for the student to provide parent information if they can't. The only reason I mentioned that was because we were going through the dependency questions, and I just made it to where the student did have a relationship with their parents and they could provide parent information. But that situation that I mentioned specifically was for those students who were not sitting at their computer with their parent, like their parent was working and they couldn't provide their information because they didn't have it. Sometimes students will select that option. I can't provide parent information because at that moment, their parent might be working or their parent might be out of town, but they can still access their parent information. And so they should not click on that option if they have a relationship with their parents and can get their parent information eventually. Because if they do select that option and submit the application, the only thing they're eligible for is unsubsidized loans, and they're basically waiving the right to the Pell Grant if they're eligible for it, or even subsidized loans if they're eligible for it. So I've had a lot of students where I'll look at their application and it'll say unsubsidized loan, you know, $5,000 or whatever it might be. And then I'll ask the student, oh, do you not have a relationship with your parents? Or are you like in foster care? Like, do you have a special circumstance? And they'll say, no, I live with my biological parents. And I'm like, well, why did you choose why did you select this option? And they'll tell me, oh, because my mom wasn't there with me that day when I was completing FAFSA. And I'm like, oh, well, we need to go back in and update that information, because at this point you are eligible for the Pell Grant, but you need to provide your parents' information. And I only know that because I've like looked at FAFSA so often. Does that make sense?
It does, and thank you for clarifying that. A scenario would be an older student, say they're 20, in their 20s, and they're trying to decide whether or not to utilize their parent taxes versus not using their parent taxes because they could or maybe not get more funding that way. So that's kind of where that question was coming from in that regard.
Okay. Yeah, okay, no, that makes sense. Typically, like students who are independent in their 20s aren't like making, you know, like $30,000 at their jobs, I guess, depending on what they do. So generally in that situation, if the student is independent, then I would just have them submit their application as an independent. Or if they are making, you know, like $30,000 to $40,000 and they're taking care of their parents, have them include their parents in the household portion if they're providing more than 50% of support for their parents.
And then another question is, if the student is filling out the FAFSA and then they did not include their, because this again would be for an older student, that they completed their FAFSA, they didn't submit it all together yet because they had some questions in regard to parent information, but they put that they're not included as a dependent on the parent taxes. And then, you know, halfway through the year or through the month, they realize that they have been included on the parent taxes. Would that mess up their financial aid process if they didn't include the parent on the original application for FAFSA? Versus
no, not at all. No, not at all. That's a really good question. I get this question a lot too, where parents will, students will say like, my brother claimed me on his tax returns because, you know, my parents don't have tax IDs or social security numbers. And they provide more than 50% of support for me. You know, like I have those situations where students will say someone else claimed them on their tax returns, but that doesn't matter. That's not an issue at all. The only thing is for FAFSA, if the student is 24 years old or older, they don't have to provide parent information at all. They're not required to, even if their parents claim them on their tax returns. So yeah, that wouldn't affect the student, the parents claiming them on their tax returns, because that doesn't hold any bearing on FAFSA. if the student was claiming parents on the taxes and forgot to put them in the household, then that might be an issue, because if they are taking care of their parents and providing support for their parents, more than 50% of their support, then they should be including them in the household so that it works in favor for the student and actually reflects what their household looks like.
Awesome, thank you. And then
You're
final
welcome.
question
Mhm.
is, you had mentioned that the address must be the same as far as what is on the IRS tax return for
Mhm.
both. Now, is that for both the student and the parent? Because again, just going back to if there's an older student that applied for FAFSA who is under 24 and they have their own, like you mentioned, their own apartment, and the parent is helping them out, but would the student still put their own address versus what was on the IRS tax form?
Yeah, so that's in regards to the data retrieval tool. So the data retrieval tool is for parents and students who've completed their tax returns and they're eligible to use the data retrieval tool on their FAFSA. And so data retrieval tool basically is a tool that both parent and student can use if they file taxes, where they log in using their FSA ID. So students should come up automatically, but parent, if they're eligible for the data retrieval tool, then they can put in their FSA ID, their password, and use the IRS website. So they put in their information and it takes them to the IRS website where they can actually pull in their tax return information for the 2019 or 2018, whichever tax year or whichever FAFSA you're using. It'll take that information and actually fill in all of the information that FAFSA needs in, regarding their taxes. So in that case, the parent does need to put exactly what's shown on their tax returns on that IRS website in order for it to work properly. But as far as the student demographic data at the beginning of the FAFSA, they can put any address that they want. It's just specifically for the IRS website that they need to use the address that they used on their tax returns. Otherwise, it doesn't work and it gives them like an error. But there isn't really any other place where the student or the parent needs to provide their address other than the student demographic data and the data using the data retrieval tool.
Awesome, thank you. That's
You're
all
welcome.
I had.
No, those are great questions. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing them. Does anyone else have any questions for me? I'm happy to answer any and all questions.
I'm sure we might have some questions by those who may watch the video and then come up with questions afterwards. But if there is any, then we will definitely forward those on to you, Delphina. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much for inviting me again. I really appreciate this, and I appreciate your questions and just listening to me. Sometimes I know that like I get excited about FAFSA, but sometimes other people don't get super excited about FAFSA or financial aid, but it's something that I actually really do enjoy talking about. So by all means, if you have questions, you can certainly email me. I'm going to put my email here in the chat just so you all have it. I also do presentations for students and like parents and anyone else. So if you have any organizations that need presentations or like a FAFSA walkthrough, I would be happy to do those.
Great,
That
thank
sounds
you.
great.
Okay, so if there's no other questions, we'll just move on really quickly. I know Delphina needs to leave at 3, So for just AIEA quick updates, we do have our membership application up on our website at www.itcaonline.com/AIEA. We do have a downloadable PDF application, but also we do have the general meetings calendar up on the website as well. So this is for the 2020-2021 application. We made a small adjustment to the membership application regarding the duration of the membership. So it's going to be from August 2020 to October 31st, 2021. And that's just because of we want to make it more suitable for COVID circumstances. So we're going to extend it to October 31st of 2021. And then our next AIEA general meeting is going to be on December 18th, so that third Friday of December. And then we also have our AIEA Protecting Our Land Winter Youth Camp. The virtual camp is going to be on Monday and Tuesday, December 28th and 29th. And more information can be found on the AIEA website again, and it's going to have its own button called the youth camp. So if you just click on there, it should be up right now. If you have any questions, please contact me. There is my email right there and my cell phone number. If you have any questions regarding registration or any of the camp activities, please let me know. I am the organizer for the youth camp. And then also we do have our virtual Educators Awards ceremony coming up. That's going to be on Saturday, February 27th, 2021. And it's going to be from 1 o'clock to 3 p.m. And we do have the award nomination packet again up on our website. And the deadline to submit the packet is January 15th, 2021. We do this year have 11 categories. And if you know any educators, whether they teach in the classroom or outside the classroom here in Arizona, please let them know. We do have this statewide nomination process open for January, up until January 15th. So if you have any questions, please let me know. And that should be it. If you have any questions, I am the webinar organizer and the AIEA secretary. There is my email and phone number again. And Kimberly Dinkalpigay, the AIEA president, is also on this webinar, and that is our AIEA office information. So if any of you have any questions, please let me know. And thank you for joining us for this webinar. And we thank you very much, Delphina Thomas, for leading this seminar and then just giving us so much information. We're so happy that you done this for us, and we thank you.
Yes, thank you, Delphina. We appreciate it. And thank you all who stayed on the call for your patience. And just stay tuned. We have more webinars coming up. Have a good weekend, everybody.